This single envelope changed the entire trajectory of my life. My mother slid it across the cold marble table, her sapphire ring catching the dim light of the chandelier. My sister, Chloe, leaned in with her phone raised, ready to record, pretending this was a family moment worth saving. The fancy restaurant went quiet around us. The pianist in the corner hesitated on a low key. Inside that thick, cream-colored envelope wasn't a check or a greeting card. It was a legal letter of disownment, signed by all three of them. That was their graduation present to me. I folded the paper once, then twice, and stood up slowly. I didn't scream. I didn't cause a scene. There was just silence and the heavy weight of that paper in my hand. They thought they had written the final chapter of my life. They didn't realize they had just written the introduction to my own empire. Stay until the very end. You will see how silence can rewrite history. Growing up, I learned very quickly that love in the Vance household was something you had to buy with success. My father, Arthur Vance, measured a person's worth by their stock portfolio and quarterly returns. My mother, Eleanor, measured it in gala invites and social standing. My sister, Chloe, was the perfect mix of both. At our family parties, I was always the last one introduced. Chloe is a vice president of public relations, my mother would beam, her hand resting proudly on my sister's shoulder. Then, her voice would drop, sounding almost sorry. And this is Jordan. He is still finding his path. The guests would nod and look at me for a second before turning back to their expensive drinks. I learned to smile back quietly, exactly how they wanted me to. Our dining room always smelled of expensive lilies and high expectations. The light from the crystal fixture above the table fractured into 1,000 pieces on my water glass. I used to count those little shards of light while my father talked about hedge funds and my mother practiced her speeches for charity events. They never asked about my day. To them, I was just background noise. Chloe thrived in that world of high stakes and bright lights. She knew exactly how to glide through a crowded room, when to laugh at a bad joke, and when to tilt her head to look like she was listening. I studied her like she was a biology project. Every move she made earned her a nod of approval. Every pause she took was calculated for effect. I, on the other hand, worked the graveyard shift at a data center downtown. The hum of the server racks was louder and more comforting than any conversation at our dinner table. At the data center, the machines didn't care about my last name or my family's legacy. They just needed the code to be clean and the cooling systems to be functional. I loved that. It was measurable, logical, and honest. One rainy Tuesday, after a 12-hour shift, I came home to find Chloe sitting at the kitchen island. Her tablet was open, and my father was pouring a vintage red wine. "We were just discussing your future," he said, swirling the dark liquid in his glass. "Chloe thinks you are wasting your potential sitting in that dark server room." Chloe didn't even look up from her screen. "It isn't just wasting time, Dad. It's embarrassing." Her voice was light and airy, but the words were sharp enough to cut. "People ask what you do, Jordan, and I have to invent things." I laughed softly, pretending the comment didn't sting my chest. "I am paying for my own tuition," I said calmly. My father shrugged, dismissing my effort with a wave of his hand. "Tuition is an investment, Jordan. Working for hourly wages is a loss. Remember that." I wanted to tell him that I understood investments better than he thought. I wanted to tell him I was building something that would outlast his hedge fund. But his eyes were already back on Chloe, discussing her next press release. That was the night I stopped trying to join their world. I started watching them from the outside, collecting data in the quiet way that made sense to me. Even after that conversation, there were small moments where I foolishly thought things might change. When I won the state innovation grant for my research in renewable energy, I sent the email to the family group chat. I attached the press clipping and the certificate. I waited for a thumbs up, a heart, anything. My mother replied 7 hours later. "That is nice, dear. We have the foundation gala tonight." Please make sure your suit is pressed if you decide to show up. They never mentioned the award again. That was the day I understood a simple, painful truth about my family. Attention was a currency, and I was bankrupt. I remember the sound of their laughter that night as they got ready for the gala. The silk of their clothes rustled like money. I sat in my room, listening to the front door close, sealing me inside the silence. That silence used to feel lonely, but that night, it started to feel like a strategy. I realized my place in this family was somewhere between invisible and irrelevant. 2 days before my college graduation, a notification popped up on my phone. It was a calendar invite from my mother. Pre-graduation dinner for Jordan. Location, the Obsidian Room. It was the most expensive restaurant in Seattle, the kind of place they booked for business mergers, not family celebrations. The note on the invite was short: dress appropriately. 6 p.m. No love, no warmth, just a command. I clicked the link to view the reservation details on the restaurant's website. My heart sank. The guest list read, the Vance family, Arthur, Eleanor, Chloe. My name wasn't listed as a guest. I was the event, but I wasn't a person to them. It felt intentional. An hour later, Chloe texted me privately. Don't freak out about the list. It's just a glitch in their system. A glitch. That word echoed in my mind. That is how they saw me. A glitch in their perfect program. A variable that needed to be deleted. That night, I sat at my desk, watching the rain streak against the windowpane. The city lights of Seattle flickered through the water droplets like distorted stars. My email inbox was glowing with unread messages from professors, engineers, and potential investors. Achievements, milestones, acknowledgments. But none of it felt heavy enough to anchor me when the people who raised me still treated me like a ghost. I scrolled through our digital family albums on the cloud. Vacations in Europe, holidays in Aspen, fundraisers in New York. My mother always had flawless posture. My father always had his rehearsed executive smile. Chloe always looked like she was posing for a magazine cover. And there I was, always at the edge of the frame, half lit, half seen, sometimes blurry. It wasn't new, but it was the first time I saw the pattern without hoping it would break. The next morning, I received an email from the university confirming my final project submission. My mentor, Professor Holloway, had nominated me for the Future Tech Visionary Award. He wrote a simple note at the bottom: "This is your moment, Jordan. Own it quietly." Quietly. That word felt like a lifeline. It was something solid in a world made of glass and pretension. I closed my laptop and took a deep, steady breath. The gray morning light cut through the blinds in clean, geometric lines. I started to notice how precise everything around me had become. The coffee mug was aligned with the edge of the notebook. The papers were stacked by priority. The clock on the wall ticked at a steady, rhythmic pace. That was the first moment I realized my life wasn't a mess. It was organized. It just wasn't organized by them anymore. I smiled. It was the kind of smile you wear when you know the secret before anyone else does. The night before the dinner, the city hummed under the weight of a summer storm. My apartment windows were fogged at the corners, the glass trembling with the wind. Inside, everything was in order. Papers aligned, screens glowing a soft, cool blue. I brewed a fresh pot of black coffee, the smell cutting through the damp air, sharp and grounding. My fingers tapped the keyboard in rhythm with the rain outside. Each line of code, every document filed, was another quiet act of rebellion. I had stopped trying to explain myself to them months ago. Explanations were for people who wanted to be understood. Records were for people who intended to be remembered. So I kept records. Every scholarship form, every grant letter, every line of code from my project, EchoGrid. What began as a small research assignment in that dusty server room had evolved into something real. It was a software platform that optimized energy distribution for city grids, saving millions in wasted power. My team consisted of Marcus, who handled the analytics, and Sam, who designed the interface. I, the black sheep of the Vance family, had written the core algorithm. It wasn't glamorous work. It was late nights, cold pizza, and eyes burning from staring at screens. But it worked. The breakthrough came one early morning, long before the sun came up. I ran a simulation that showed EcoGrid could cut energy waste by 15%. I remember leaning back in my cheap office chair, staring at the green numbers on the black screen. Proof. Tangible, undeniable proof. It didn't matter if my father thought I was wasting time. The math said I was changing the world. By the time the university's startup symposium arrived, EcoGrid was polished and ready. Professor Holloway stopped me before I went on stage. "You don't need to sell yourself," he said. "Just show them the data." I walked onto that stage and let the numbers do the talking. When the presentation ended, the applause was polite at first, then it grew into something real and heavy. Among the crowd stood a man in a tailored charcoal suit. Sterling Cross, the CEO of Helix Energy. He approached me afterward, his expression serious and focused. "You have built something scalable," he said, studying my graphs. "But more than that, you built something necessary." Necessary. A word I hadn't heard applied to me in years. We met twice after that symposium. The third time, he slid a leather folder across a mahogany table. Inside was a letter of intent. Helix Energy wanted to acquire EcoGrid for $8.5 million, plus a vice president of innovation position for me immediately after graduation. I didn't sign it immediately. I read every clause, every subline. I wanted to make sure the system I had built, the one built from silence, not privilege, stayed intact. When I finally signed the paper, I didn't feel a rush of triumph. I felt balanced. From that point on, I started building my own archive. Digital copies of every document, time-stamped and encrypted. Transaction receipts, licensing records, payment confirmations. It was the kind of paper trail that doesn't just tell a story, it seals it shut. The night I received the final transfer confirmation from Helix Energy, I printed the letter. The sound of the paper sliding out of the printer was cleaner than any round of applause. That was when I opened the family group chat for the first time in months. The most recent message was from my mother. A photo of Chloe at a PR launch, captioned "Perfection as always." I typed a simple reply, "Graduation dinner confirmed. I will be there." No emojis. No explanation. If you have ever felt like you are working hard in the shadows while everyone else is in the spotlight, please hit the like button. It helps us know we are not alone in the quiet grind. After sending that text, I cleaned my apartment the way I always did before major moments. Every item had a place. Every line had symmetry on the desk. My offer letter, my degree folder, and a small, faded envelope I had kept since childhood. It was a birthday card my mother once gave me when I was 5, with "To my little genius" written on it. I placed the new legal documents beneath it. The ink was fresh, the paper was heavy. Midnight came quietly. I closed my laptop, poured the last of the coffee, and watched the city lights ripple across the wet pavement below. I thought about the upcoming dinner. Their smiles, the cameras, the performance. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of them. They would bring their own letter, thinking it would define me. What they didn't know is that I had already signed something far more permanent. I had signed my independence. I fell asleep with that thought drifting through my mind. The rain had stopped. The silence that followed felt almost ceremonial, like the world was holding its breath. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The first light caught the corner of the desk, gleaming off the silver clip holding my contracts together. I touched the paper lightly, grounding myself. I didn't dress for them. I dressed for the records. I wore a clean navy blazer, a crisp white shirt, and neutral tones. It was the kind of look that doesn't beg to be seen but demands to be respected. Before leaving, I aligned my coffee cup next to the laptop, exactly 1 inch from the edge. Habit. Order. Proof. I locked the door behind me. The streets of Seattle were still damp, reflections stretching across the asphalt like mirrors. My reflection looked back from the window of a passing bus. Calm. Composed. Someone I recognized for the first time. When I arrived near the obsidian room, I stopped in front of the heavy glass doors. Inside, I could already see the faint shimmer of chandeliers, the silhouette of my mother's hair, and the familiar tilt of Chloe's head as she adjusted her phone camera for a selfie. I breathed once, steady and deep. They thought tonight was their stage. They had no idea the script had already been rewritten, signed, sealed, and time-stamped. This time, I wasn't walking into their performance. I was walking into my proof. The hostess smiled when she saw me. "Vance party?" she asked. Her tone was professional, but I caught the flicker of surprise when she realized my name wasn't printed on the reservation list. I nodded anyway. "Yes," I said. "They are expecting me." Inside, the air smelled of truffle oil and expensive indifference. My family occupied the corner table under a halo of golden light. My mother waved as if this were a happy reunion, not a scheduled execution. Chloe lifted her phone slightly, framing the shot to include the table setting. "Jordan, darling," my mother said, her voice dipped in fake sugar. "We have something special for you." A waiter appeared, setting a pristine white envelope by my plate. My father cleared his throat, his rehearsed authority filling the pause in the conversation. "It is time we all move forward," he said. My mother smiled wider, showing too many teeth. "From all of us," she added. Chloe's camera caught everything, the envelope sliding across the linen tablecloth, my expression unreadable. I opened it slowly. The paper was heavily embossed with legal stock. "We, the undersigned, hereby release and relinquish all familial obligations and ties with Jordan Vance." It was signed by each of them. Their initials were perfect loops, practiced and sharp. It was my graduation gift. The table watched me, waiting for a scene. Maybe a tear. Maybe a raised voice. But I had already lived the real drama in the sleepless nights coding Echo Grid. I folded the paper once, twice, then placed it carefully beside my coffee spoon. "Thank you," I said. My tone was even and deliberate. Chloe blinked, lowering her phone. "You are thanking us?" I met her gaze for the first time that night. The air tightened, thin as glass. My father shifted in his chair, his suit jacket straining slightly. My mother's hand hovered over her wine glass. Chloe lowered her phone completely, unsure what she was filming anymore. "Jordan," my mother said softly, her voice wavering. "You don't have to make this harder." But I was already reaching into my leather bag. I pulled out a folder, the same neutral gray as the suit Sterling Cross had worn the day he handed me the contract. I placed it on the table and opened it toward them. Inside was the acquisition announcement. The Helix Energy letterhead gleamed under the chandelier light. Beneath it, my name was printed clearly, Jordan Vance, Vice President of Innovation. Integration Lead. For a moment, no one spoke. The piano music in the background shifted songs, unaware it was scoring a funeral for their ego. Chloe leaned forward, reading the text faster than the others. "This is yours?" she whispered. "Yes." My father frowned, the kind of frown he reserved for bad quarterly reports. "You sold it?" "I built it." "Then I sold it," I said quietly. "The deal closed last week." My mother tried to recover her composure, adjusting her pearls. "We didn't know." "I know," I said. It was the first time I had ever seen my mother truly speechless. Chloe's phone was still in her hand, but the recording light was off now. My father reached for his wine glass, but his grip trembled slightly, just enough for the stem to click against the marble coaster. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile. I simply stood up. You can keep the letter, I said, sliding their disownment papers back across the table toward them. I already have my own. The irony landed quietly, perfectly. If you are enjoying this story of turning the tables, please subscribe to the channel. We post stories like this every week. Behind me, I heard Chloe whisper something. Maybe a plea, maybe a curse. But I didn't turn back. As I reached the doorway, the restaurant's soft piano filled the silence they left behind. I paused, one hand on the brass frame of the door, the city lights reflecting in the glass ahead of me. In that reflection, I saw them still sitting there, surrounded by the world they had built. Bright. Polished. Empty. Outside, the air was colder than I expected. It smelled like rain and freedom. I checked my phone. New messages from Helix Energy. Notifications from tech news outlets were already picking up the acquisition story. Proof. All time-stamped. The envelope in my hand felt lighter now. Just paper and ink, nothing more. They had given me their silence years ago. Tonight, I returned it to them, perfected. The night air off the Puget Sound felt sharper than usual, clean enough to rinse everything that clung to me from inside that restaurant. The city pulsed beyond the glass towers, indifferent and alive. I walked without rushing, the sound of my shoes folding into the hum of passing cars. Each step carried less weight than the one before it. When I reached my apartment, the sky had thinned into early dawn. Pale blue light spilled through the blinds, painting quiet patterns on the floorboards. I set the envelope on the counter next to my framed degree. Their letter looked small beside the new one. Helix Energy's offer was embossed, final, and signed. 2 documents. 2 versions of my name. One they tried to erase. One they couldn't touch. I made coffee, just like always, pouring it slowly and steady. The cup clicked softly against the table. That sound had become my pulse. Measured. Controlled. Alive. I didn't reread their letter. It had already served its purpose. It was a timestamp marking the exact moment I stopped asking to belong. Now it sat behind glass, flattened between achievements that couldn't be deleted. My phone vibrated once on the table. A text from Chloe. We didn't mean it like that. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for a while. The 3 little dots blinked, disappeared, then blinked again. Then I turned the phone face down. Some messages aren't meant to be answered. They are meant to echo into the silence. The light shifted warmer outside. The city stretched awake. Delivery vans, joggers, the rhythm of another ordinary day. I opened the window, letting the fresh air in. Somewhere below, a train screeched metal against metal, raw and honest. In the reflection on the glass, I saw a person who no longer needed to explain why they were standing there alone. I picked up their letter one last time, folded it neatly, and slid it behind the frame of my degree. Not hidden, just placed in order. Evidence of what was. Proof of what changed. The air in the room steadied. My shoulders did too. Silence, at last, didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Revenge didn't sound like a victory speech. It sounded like a calm breath in a quiet room. The kind of silence you choose, not the kind forced on you. Families break loudly. Peace rebuilds quietly. They wrote me out of their story, but I became the footnote they will never be able to erase. Some stories don't end with forgiveness. They end with clarity. If you have ever been the quiet one in the room, the one everyone underestimated, this story is for you. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes silence isn't surrender. It is a strategy. And the calm that follows is the greatest prize of all.